What I have found is that a lot of people who are struggling with binge eating relate to binge eating as the problem itself. They need to solve it. They need to make it stop. They just need to find a new diet. They just need to white knuckle it and hold themselves back from binge eating. And when you relate to binge eating like that, you are going to stay stuck with binge eating. Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Kara. Since 2017, I have been working as a food and body image coach. I help people build better relationships with food and their bodies, whether they're struggling with yo-yo dieting, binge eating, emotional eating, all-consuming, obsessive thoughts about food and their weight. And I support them in finding freedom and peace in these areas. And today, this video, I want to talk about what you have to understand in order to heal from binge eating, to break free from it, to no longer engage in this behavior. What I have found is that a lot of people who are struggling with binge eating relate to binge eating as the problem itself. So what you have to understand is that binge eating is a symptom of a problem. It's not actually the problem. And in order to heal from binge eating, you have to understand what causes it first and address the causes head on. And I say causes because there are a variety of causes, and I am going to discuss them in this video. So hang tight. I'm going to get to that in a second. But when you address binge eating at the level of binge eating, you're not getting to the root of the problem. And binge eating is primarily a reaction to restriction and deprivation around food. Now, that restriction and deprivation can look a variety of ways. So let's get into it. The first way that restriction and deprivation can look is what I call physical or real restriction. This is where you are limiting the types of foods that you're eating or the quantity of the foods that you're eating. Maybe you're trying to not eat bread, or you're trying to not eat sugar, or you're trying to stay within a specific macro or calorie count each day. Maybe you're trying to follow a specific diet like Whole30 or Weight Watchers or Atkins or paleo or vegan. Whatever it is, you are intentionally restricting, meaning you're trying not to eat certain foods or quantity of foods. This is the most common cause of binge eating. When we limit the amount of food that we're eating, we have this natural biological reaction where our body's like, oh my God, panic, famine, I'm not getting adequate food and nutrition, my needs aren't being met. And so you have this natural biological reaction where your body just lunges you towards the food. The next type of restriction that is really common is what I call future perceived restriction. This is the second most common cause of binge eating. And this is a product of what is referred to as the diet mentality. The diet mentality is a diet-like way of thinking, even if you're not on a traditional diet, like maybe you're not on Weight Watchers or Whole30, but you're still thinking like a dieter, meaning you think some foods are good, some foods are bad, some foods are okay to eat and not okay to eat. So this future perceived deprivation shows up like diet starts tomorrow, or diet starts January 1st. Diet starts when I get home from vacation. What you're doing is you're essentially saying that at some point in the future, I am no longer going to have access to these foods. I'm going to be good. I'm going to stick to my diet. I'm going to, try so hard in the future. What that implies, like the subliminal implication of thought processes like that, is better get it all in now. So you actually trigger yourself to binge eat or to overeat in the moment when you're planning to remove food in the future. And so in order to prevent that type of in the moment binge eating, because you're like, well, I just got to get it in because tomorrow it's going away, you have to stop planning to restrict food in the future. The third cause of binge eating, the third type of restriction and deprivation, is what I call vitamin P restriction. P stands for pleasure. This is where you are giving yourself physical access to these previously sworn off foods. Like maybe you're in the process of intuitive eating and you're trying to give yourself unconditional permission to eat and work through that process. But this is a common area where people really get stuck with unconditional permission to eat, and it's with vitamin P restriction. So this is where you are putting the food in your mouth. You're eating the cake, the cookies, you're having bread with your sandwich, you're having croutons and cheese and dressing with your salads, you're letting yourself eat ice cream. But the entire time you're eating those foods, or right before you eat those foods, or after you eat those foods, you're telling yourself, this is bad, this is wrong, I shouldn't be doing this. You're freaking out about what the food is going to do to your body. So although you're physically giving yourself permission to eat those foods, mentally and emotionally, you're not actually okay with it. You're still mentally and emotionally depriving your experience of eating those foods. You're restricting pleasure and satisfaction. And so you just keep eating and eating and eating and binge eating until you've eaten the entire carton of ice cream or tray of cookies. And so you have to work through those parts of your brain that are like, this is bad, you shouldn't be doing it, and you're worried about what it's going to do to your body, so that you can actually feel satisfied. You can actually feel pleasure from those foods. So this is really sticky. This can be really complicated, but identifying if it is something that you're dealing with is step one in freeing yourself up from those thought processes that just keep you eating and eating and eating. The fourth primary cause of binge eating, and this one is a big one, so just bear with me. It is called emotional restriction. So emotional restriction is where you have maybe unhealed emotional wounds and pain. Maybe it's inner child wounds. Maybe it's previous trauma that you haven't fully dealt with. Maybe you're just not sure how to deal with your feelings. And so you turn to food to suppress, numb, avoid, and cope. Maybe you just have these really big feelings and you don't know how else to deal with them. And so food is your primary coping mechanism. And when you are turning to food for emotional reasons, you have to understand that the thing to focus on is your emotional world. It's your inner world. It's the way that you talk to yourself. It's these past experiences that maybe you haven't fully dealt with or made peace with or accepted that they happened. Another way that emotional restriction can look is if you don't have enough joy or pleasure or happiness or creativity or self-expression in your life. And so you're turning to food for that. Like food is the only thing that brings you joy. It's the best part of your day. You don't have other components to your life that are fulfilling and enriching. And so food is providing that for you. This is less common, but it still happens. And so it's worth just mentioning. However, with emotional restriction, this is the most nuanced, the most complex cause. And a lot of people will address the first three causes that I mentioned: physical restriction or real restriction, future perceived restriction, and vitamin P restriction. They'll address those, but they're still struggling with binge eating, which means that there is likely these underlying unhealed emotional wounds and pain. And again, it could be as big as little t trauma or capital T trauma. And it is causing you to act out emotionally with food, to bury your emotions with food, to numb out with food and not deal with what needs to be dealt with. So I hope this video was helpful in showing you what is causing your binge eating. Binge eating is always a symptom or a side effect. You have to get underneath the hood, you have to look underneath the hood at what is causing these behaviors and address that head on. If you do want to take this education further and you are resonating with what I'm saying in this video, I do have an online course. It's called Food, Body, Soul. It's a self-paced, self-study course. It's designed to support you in uncovering these causes, getting to the root, and then working through the body image components here, because binge eating is almost always accompanied with hating your body and being obsessed with weight and always wishing you were thinner. And then it also supports you in building a better relationship with yourself. And that's really the key to no longer having these problems with food pop back up. So I will put a link to the course in the description below. You can go and read about it. And then in the comments, please leave any questions that you have, any comments that you have. Let me know if this was helpful. And then if you have other questions, I will either answer them in the comments or I will create another video. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this, and I really hope that it is helpful.